But that's what it does. That's the only thing it can do, because that's how everything works.
Transforming from another dimension.
Yeah, you could say it's taking energy from another dimension, counter space. There's 22-year-long solar cycles of deadness and activity and deadness and activity. They started in the early Renaissance. And they peaked out around World War II, and now that we're in cycle 24, the sun's going dead, and it's not creating an ionosphere. It's like the solar cycles are ending. So today the solar flux is 140 something. It should be 200 and something. So the sun's only operating at half power right now for this part of the cycle. So you don't have the ionosphere that you need in order to communicate to other parts of the world. It's all dissipated.
So ham radio is dying.
Well, it made it so there was no ham radio available for a year during the minimum of the cycle. Now we're at the maximum, and the maximum is no better than a minimum. So now the question is when it goes into the minimum in the next 7 years, how dead is the sun going to get? The last minimum, it got record dead. The solar flux never dropped below 60, ever. This time it went down to 58. And you couldn't communicate via the ionosphere. So the sun can be reconfiguring for a cold, dead cycle, like in the Dark Ages. There's a popular book written on the subject called Jupiter Effect. It's actually fairly accurate.
The Jupiter Effect.
Yeah, it was about the total planetary alignment in 1980. And the solar flares that it was predicted to create, according to the RCA theory. And the solar flares happened just like they were predicted. Enough to finally trip off Mount St. Helens. Solar flux went up to over 400. The Earth actually wobbled on its orbit from the coronal mass ejections hitting it.
When was this?
1980. October 1980.
Is that when you did the ceremony?
Where it controls all the frequencies. So if you don't know what the sun's doing, you don't know what frequencies to use. That's why RCA started radio astrology. You have to know what the sun's doing, and the planets tell you what the sun's doing. So RCA gave me the equipment, Sonoma State provided me with the place to do it, and the Cosmos provided me with the total planetary alignment. So I was the guy with the equipment and everything right there as the thing happened. I studied the whole event over the couple of years that the whole solar cycle built into this alignment. There's no inside structure.
Is it hollow?
Yeah, there's only a surface. There's nothing inside.
Is the sun actually, do we believe, combusting in on
It's
itself?
not burning anything. There's no fusion in the sun. That's well understood.
Proven.
Yeah, well, there's no way to prove that there is any. It's only in the flares that you get fusion. That's why all the X-rays. The flares, the arcs, and the X-rays, and the microwaves, and whatever result of fusion in the arcs. There's no fusion in the sun. They don't know how the sun works.
Why do you, what's special, how does the sun make light?
It's a transformer. Transforms from some other dimension. It's not burning anything. It doesn't have to. It's a converter.
Of what?
I don't know. Nobody knows. But that's what it does. That's the only thing it can do, because that's how everything works.
Transforming from another dimension.
Yeah, you could say it's taking energy from another dimension, counter space.
In the incandescent sun is all idea that Earth knows. The idea of the apple of Earth is in the sun. Likewise, the wood of the tree and the violet in the meadow. Likewise, the cool earth is there, with its rivers and mountains. All idea is one idea in the light of the sun. The light of the sun is never divided into its many seeming separate ideas until it is electrically extended from the sun and those extensions electrically echoed back to it. The sun is a crucible which melts all ideas into one, then sets them out into space to cool and separate into many units of that one. Likewise, idea of mind never becomes the many ideas of creation until electricity divides the one idea into many separate parts. The one light cannot be divided, but extensions of the one light can appear to divide it. The spots of sunlight upon the cathedral floor are many, but they are all extensions of the one light of their source in the sun. Likewise, all mankind is an extension of the one idea of man, for man is but one in the light of his source. Likewise, all moving extensions of the one still light, as manifested in the white light of suns and the black light of their surrounding space, are but extensions of one source. One of the greatest mysteries of science is the source of the sun's renewing energy. At the present rate of solar radiation, the sun should have burned out long ago.
Don't have
but
solar
what
panels
keeps
on
its
our
fi-
houses yet. Somebody please tell me that. I was a kid back in the 70s. Yes, I'm dating myself, but whatever. We were talking about solar energy then. What happened to it? I mean, I know it's more readily available, but seriously, it should be everywhere. It should be absolutely everywhere. Unless there's a flaw. But I don't understand why it hasn't been figured out yet.
Fires burning. What is it that generates heat in the sun to keep it from cooling? One theory is that its contraction generates it, for contraction supposedly heats. But that is not the answer, for contraction does not heat nor generate. Contraction is possible only as a result of generation, not as its cause. Generation must precede contraction. It does not follow it. Heat follows as a result of contraction. Heat radiates. Radiation is the opposite of generation, and opposites act in opposite ways. Radiation expands and the resultant expansion cools, while generation contracts and the resultant contraction heats. Here again is the father-mother principle manifesting its law of equal, opposite, and sequential interchange. The cold of expanded space generates the sun's heat by compressing large volume into smaller volume. The high pressure of incandescence is born from the low pressure of vacuous blackness, in accordance with the law of rhythmic balanced interchange between all pairs of father-mother opposites. The temperature cycle. The temperature cycle resulting from balanced interchange between the cold of space and the heat of suns is as follows. Cold generates, generation contracts, contraction heats, heat radiates, radiation expands, and expansion cools. Thus, our hot sun is being generated from cold space via its poles and is radiated back again into space via its equator, in accord with the father-mother reciprocative process of inside-out, outside-in turning, and will continue to generate increasing heat in the sun until it becomes a true sphere. This spherical perfection has not yet been attained, for the sun has not yet reached the amplitude of its wave where all forming matter becomes true spheres. One opposite borns the other. When the amplitude position is attained, its radiation will then begin to exceed its generation. It will then be the same condition as a man who has just passed his maturity high point, when death and life interchange their preponderances. From that point on, cold space will bore a black hole through the sun, from pole to pole, and it will expand into a giant ring, centered by a smaller sun, recondensed from the remnant of its expanding self. Many such ring nebulae are visible in the heavens, notably in the Lyra Ring Nebula, M57, figure 61, page 252. The star tells the whole story. Excellent examples of the degeneration of a sun into a ring or rings by the inside-out turning process of negative electricity are the Owl Nebula, M97, in
I think it's, I'm just going to spell it, URSAE Majoris, and the Dumbbell Nebula in Velpeculi, figure 62, page 252. One can likewise witness this inside-out turning process in his kitchen range. Jets of burning gas are seen as a blue and green flame around black holes, which center each jet. These gases are negatively preponderant, which means that they are thrusting out from their center in excess of pulling inward from it.
But that's what it does. That's the only thing it can do, because that's how everything works.
It's transforming from another dimension.
Yeah, you could say it's taking energy from another dimension, counter space.
The inward radial direction is north, the compressive direction of gravity, which multiplies potential by compressing light waves radially into smaller volumes of greater frequencies. The outward radial direction is south, the expansive direction of radiation, which divides potential by expanding light waves into larger volumes of lesser frequencies. The two directions of the static universe are east and west. They are static because they are spherical. They follow curved planes of unchanging equipotential pressures, such as the contour of the Earth or Sun, or of the orbits of planets or floating clouds. East and west do not oppose each other. Each arrives at its own starting point without change of potential. North and south, on the contrary, diametrically oppose each other. They are constantly changing. They seek opposite directions, each passing through the other in opposite spiral lanes, each interchanging with the other as it passes, each voiding the other through that interchange, and each becoming the other because of it. East-west spherical planes form the axes of light waves from which the dynamic universe extends its gyroscopic wave radially at amplitudes of 90 degrees, and also its other gyroscopic octave tones at the varying degrees of pressures where the elements of matter are formed. East-west spherical planes are also the fulcrums of wave levers, which curve gravity as they pump high potential into low to expand solids into the gases of space, and low potential into high to compress light waves into the solids of Earth's. Incandescent suns of white-hot light are born from cold black darkness, and cold dark space is born from white-hot suns. This curved electric universe. All suns are generated into incandescence by two black rivers of evacuated light, which flow centripetally inward toward their still centers by the way of their poles. Conversely, darkness of space is radiated from two incandescent rivers of white light, which flow centrifugally from sun's equators. Thus are the four arms of all spiral nebulae formed as two pairs of opposite interchanging with each other to become the other two. The two black arms belong to gravity, and the two white ones to vacuity. This electric universe is curved. Motion is spiral. Where motion ceases, curvature ceases. Cleavages between wave field boundary planes of crystals separate them into their individual crystal forms. Motion cannot pass through those planes, for there is naught but stillness there. Motion is repeated in all wave fields by reflected extension from wave field boundary planes.
Iron, for example. Iron is a separate part of the whole. We think of iron as a hard, cold metal with certain properties, which make it possible for us to manufacture it into many products. When iron is in its frozen condition, we do not think of it as light, but we can photograph by it if we heat it to incandescence. Not only is it then light, but all of the properties which make it available to us as iron have then gone out of it. It is as though the divine tapestry weaver had unwoven all the threads of the idea of iron and sorted them into their spectrum colors, thread by thread. The physicist can tell you what elements those threads of light would be if frozen. Upon looking at them, he would say, that is iron. But it would not be the form of iron as we know it. It would be the formless idea of iron as the sun knows it. There is no separateness. In the incandescent sun is all idea that earth knows. The idea of the apple of earth is in the sun. Likewise, the wood of the tree and the violet in the meadow. Likewise, the cool earth is there, with its rivers and mountains. All idea is one idea in the light of the sun. The light of the sun is never divided into its many seeming separate ideas until it is electrically extended from the sun and those extensions electrically echoed back to it. The sun is a crucible which melts all ideas into one, then sets them out into space to cool and separate into many units of that one. Likewise, idea of mind never becomes the many ideas of creation until electricity divides the one idea into many separate parts. The one light cannot be divided, but extensions of the one light can appear to divide it. The spots of sunlight upon the cathedral floor are many, but they are all extensions of the one light of their source in the sun. Likewise, all mankind is an extension of the one idea of man, for man is but one in the light of his source. Likewise, all moving extensions of the one still light, as manifested in the white light of suns and the black light of their surrounding space, are but extensions of one source. All idea is still. The cinema exemplifies this meaning. Upon the screen are many patterned ideas in noisy, violent motion. We know, however, that all of the motion of separate ideas and all the sounds emanating from those patterned, moving forms would instantly cease if the still source of light from which these images and sounds are projected were turned off. We know that the cause of all this transient division into positive and negative effect is in the one still light from which it is projected. We know that the sounds we hear emanate from that stillness, yet we seem to be totally unaware of the fact that all of our pulsing universe is but an extension of one still light of universal mind, projected through positive and negative light upon the universal screen of space. It is difficult to conceive Earth and all of its phenomena of motion, sound, people, animals, and plant life as a motion picture projection from our sun, yet all of the separate ideas of Earth are in that one incandescent light of the sun. All are but one thing, light. Turn off the sun and all of its patterned ideas on Earth would instantly cease. The still idea which is extended into motion is not in the motion, but in the stillness from which it is extended. For I say that man who senses but clay of earth in him is bound to earth as clayed image of his earth. Clayed images of my imagining, who knoweth not me, in them are but dwellers of earth's dark. To sensed man, the doors of my kingdom are self-barred by darkness until the light of me in him is known by him as me. Until then, he is but moving clay, manifesting not me in him, while sensing naught but moving clay of him, knowing not the glory of my light in him. Wherefore I say to thee, exalt thou thyself beyond thy sensing. Know me as fulcrum of thy thinking. Be me as deep well of thy knowing. From the Divine Iliad. There is no death. He who seeketh life without the light will find death, but he who seeketh the light will find eternal life, even when he walketh toward death. He who knoweth not the light shall die to find it, but he who knoweth the light shall never die. In man's inhaling there is life, and death trails his exhaling.
Yet must man breathe out to live again, and deeply, in that he may die. Know thou that I alone live, I do not die, but out of me cometh both seeming life and death. Life is but the inward flow of my thinking's divided pulsing, and death is its outward flow. Know also that the divisions of my thinking are but equal halves of one, for I again say that I am one, and that all things which come from me are one, divided to appear as two. All things come and go from my divided thinking. All coming things are living things, and those which go are dead. Know thou that all creating things are resurrected from the dead, and dead things live again through my divided thinking. Again I say that all things are bound as one through light. I am forever creating my living body and destroying it in seeming death, that it may live in me to die and live again. The end of life and death is life's new beginning. Both life and death are one in me. All things are forever living and forever dying, and while they live they die, and also while they are in death they live. Such is my decree, my universal law, from which there is no escape for man, or star, or grain of sand. For all things flow from me, that they may appear to man, and return to me, that they may disappear from his senses in the cycle of my thinking. I am the repetitive God. All things which flow to me and from me flow again both ways through me forever in a cycle which ends not, nor has begun. From my right hand life flows one way and returneth to me full spent as death, while full death floweth the other way and returneth to me renewed as life. Around my cycle both life and death wend their opposed ways, each seeking each until the twain meet balanced at maturity, where each gives half to each. But when they pass that halfway point on their separate ways to me, each then gives thought to each, and then both know, as they return to me, that each are both, and both are one. In me. Death is the seed of life. Death rebounds from death as life. From death springeth from the soil, and from life death floweth even as the perfume leaves the rose. Death giveth of itself to life, that life may live, and likewise life giveth to death, that death may die. Life is regenerating death, and death is life degenerating. Light leaves thy sun as death, and comes to thee as life. And when thy death leaves thee, it likewise becomes new life, to whom or in what its impact quickens with thy death. Two ways there are of breath, the inward charging breath of life, and the outward discharging breath of death. All opposed pairs of my divided thinking pass in opposite ways along these two paths in their traversing of my cycle. All things which I have divided into pairs of opposites have within them both life and death, but one of these is greater than the other until they meet as equals halfway round my life-death cycle. When once they meet and pass, they then exchange these qualities, the greater growing lesser and the lesser growing greater. Even though life is full when life is born, death emanates from life itself as death and takes the opposite path towards death. Likewise does life emanate from death to weaken it when death is strong, until life conquereth death to make death live as life. Verily I say, life cannot live without dying as it lives, nor can death conquer life and gather aught to it but death. Life is my multiplying breath of compressive action, and death is my dividing, opposed breath which expands as life's reaction. Hear thou me when I again say that life and death are opposites which pass each other on my cycle going opposite ways. Life attracteth life to life by its compression, and death repelleth both death and life by its expansion. I am the interchanging point of life and death. I balance life with death, and never in their changing can either death or life outbalance death or life. Write thou that death and life are one, as the swinging pendulum is one, e'en though it oscillates two ways in its incessant swinging. He who travels east in my curved universe arrives at west as surely as he who travels west. Likewise, life traileth the eastern road to arrive at death, while death taketh the western road where life awaiteth to quicken death as life. So also does death traileth the road of life to interchange with life, while life likewise traileth the road of death to find itself through death. Hear thou me say, there is no death in all my imagined universe. In it is naught but life. For naught but life and love is in me and my knowing. Naught is there in my thinking which is not my knowing, and naught but life and love are in my thinking. Take thou man's death away from him in this new day of man. Give him eternal life in me by knowing me in him. From the Divine Iliad. Particles are variously conditioned as to pressure, but there are no different kinds of particles. All are light waves wound up into particles which are doubly charged. Their position at any one point in their wave causes them to have the electric condition appropriate for that point. Light particles are forever moving in their octave waves. All are either heading toward their cathode or their anode, which means toward vacuity or gravity. They are all moving either inward or outward, spirally.
People think our particles are spherical wave structures consisting of an outgoing wave combined with an in wave. Mathematicians are fairly happy with this because these are the only two possible solutions of the equations. So that part is okay. Now the center of this structure behaves just like a particle. The only problem is not many people know it yet because not many people have investigated it.
We're in chapter 12, and here we go. All light particles are either expressing the mother light principle or the father light principle. For example, if a particle is on the amplitude of the wave, it would be a true sphere, and as a true sphere it would be neither positive nor negative. It might then appropriately be called a neutron. A particle which is spirally heading inward toward the apex of a vortex in the process of becoming a sphere, might appropriately be called a proton because of its expressing the father light principle. Again, if it is moving spirally outward, it could appropriately be called an electron because it would then be discharging in excess of its charge or expanding in excess of its contraction. Light rays, for example, leaving the sun are discharging the sun. They are also discharging themselves because they are expanding into greater volume. They are also lowering their own potential by multiplying their volume. They reverse their polarity when radially converging upon the Earth. They are then charging the Earth and themselves by contracting into smaller volume and are simultaneously multiplying their own potential by thus contracting. Semi-cyclic alteration. In an electric current, there is a constant interchange between anode and cathode, or positive and negative poles. A light particle expands as it leaves the anode in an outward radial direction and contracts as it radially approaches the anode. This light particle has been the same light particle at all times in all parts of its journey. Its variation of charge and discharge, its direction of motion, and the condition of wave pressure in which it finds itself at any time are the sole reasons for its changing from one condition to another. The light particles are all the same light particles, all being different only in pressure condition. This is also true of the elements of matter, whether they be iron, carbon, silicon, bismuth, or radium. All are composed of the same kind of light particles. They all seem to have different qualities and attributes, but those qualities and attributes are likewise given to them purely by the positions they occupy in their waves. All things simulate light. A particle of light, which belongs to an atomic system of sodium, has in it all of the entire range of the elements, besides all of every other creating thing in the universe. It acts to carry out the purposefulness of the idea of sodium simply because it is in the pressure condition of sodium, and is a part of the unfolding pattern of the seed of inert gas, of the octave from which it has unfolded. If that same particle unfolded from the seed of the oak, it would be part of the wood fiber of its trunk or leaf, or of the chlorophyll which colored its leaves, but it would be the same kind of particle while fulfilling the purpose of cellulose, as while fulfilling the purpose of sodium. All matter in this universe is but differently conditioned, motion simulating light, and all differences in condition are pressure differences. Light does not travel. The speed with which light presumably travels is 186,400 miles per second. The distance between stars is so great that the speed of light is computed as light years, for the distance computed by lesser units of time would yield figures so great that they would be meaningless. Light only seems to travel. It is but one more of the countless illusions caused by wave motion. Waves of the ocean seem to traverse the ocean, but they only appear to do so, for waves are pistons in the universal engines, and pistons operate up and down. Wave pistons of light or of the ocean operate radially and spirally inward and outward, toward and away from gravity. Waves of light do not travel. They reproduce each other from wave field to wave field of space. The planes of zero curvature, which bound all wave fields, act as mirrors to reflect light from one field into another. This sets up an appearance of light as traveling, which is pure illusion. The sunlight we feel upon our bodies is not actual light from the sun. What actually is happening is that the sun is reproducing its own condition on the earth by extending the reproductions out through cold space into ever-enlarging wave fields until those reproductions begin to converge again toward our center of gravity into even smaller wave fields. The heat we feel and the light we see are dependent entirely upon the ability of the wave fields to reproduce the light and heat, and that ability is conditioned upon the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. If there were no moisture in the atmosphere, our bodies would carbonize from the heat thus reproduced. One cannot consistently think of that heat as direct rays of the sun, for that same sunlight was intensely cold during its reproduced journey through the immensely expanded wave fields of space between the sun and earth. The light and heat which appear to come from the star or sun have never left the star or sun. That which man sees as light and feels as heat are the reproduced counterparts of the light and heat which are its cause. The rate of vibration in a wave field depends upon its volume. Vibration in a wave field means the pulse of interchange between its compressed core and the space surrounding that core. A slow vibration in a large wave field would cool one's body or even freeze it, while fast pulsing interchange in extremely small wave fields could burn one's body. A lens which multiplies light and heat toward a focal point which sets paper on fire merely compresses larger wave fields into smaller ones. The rate of vibration increases for the same reason that the planets nearest the sun move much faster in their small orbits than those which are far away from the sun. Kepler's law, covering the speeds of planets, will apply to rates of vibration in wave fields so appropriately as with the movements in the solar system. The imaged universe of my dual thinking is a two-way interchanging between unbalanced lever ends of light, which extend from me, their fulcrum of power in rest, and return to me. Behold in me the fulcrum of my changing universe, which manifests change, though I change not, nor move. For I am rest. In me alone is balance. He who would find power must know that he extends from me, that I am he. He who would find rest must return to me, be fulcrum of his own power. From the Divine Iliad. Chapter 13, Cycles. All energy is expressed in wave cycles. A cycle is a two-way electric journey from a compression point of rest, where gravity ceases and radiation begins, to an expansion point of rest at wave field boundaries, where radiation ceases and gravity begins. It is the universal heartbeat of this pulsing universe of two-way motion. The life-death cycle of man is one wave in an electric current. Growth and decay, or the incoming-outgoing, is the universal heartbeat of this pulsing universe of two-way motion. Matter is expressed in two-way cycles because matter is but a record of God's knowing, expressed by the two opposed desires of His two-way self-voiding thinking. All nature is an expression of the two desires of the Creator, the desire for separation from the oneness of rest in Him, into a multiplicity of imaged forms of His imagining, and for avoidance of that multiplicity by a return to rest in His oneness. A cycle is like winding and unwinding a clock spring, except that matter is wound up into visible spheres and unwound into invisible cubes. The unwinding of a clock spring is a reverse process from that of its winding. Nature is continuous. It never reverses. Like the piston in an engine or two children on a seesaw, nature turns its waves inside out and outside in a continuous spiral flow of direction. Solid matter gradually interchanges with space in its breathing cycles until gravitation has attained its maximum. Radiation then exceeds the power of gravitation, and matter begins to expand instead of to contract. Radiation is light outwardly bound from the seed. Gravitation is light inwardly bound toward the seed. Outwardly bound light manifests the unfolding of pattern light from the seed. It is the mother of creation. Inwardly bound light manifests the refolding of pattern light into its seed. It is the father of creation. The mother of creation gives pattern bodies to idea by unfolding idea unto the heavens. That is the first half of every cycle. The Father refolds all unfolding idea back toward its seed. Otherwise, the unfolding form could not become visible as matter. That is the second half of every cycle. All growing things manifest this unfolding and refolding process in every pulsation of interchange between the Father-Mother lights of creation. The outward-inward breath of all things is the constant interchanging cyclic process by means of which one opposite gradually becomes the other, until each becomes the other in totality by completing the interchange. Each outward-inward breath is a cycle. Each half cycle is cancelled by its other half until both are cancelled. Neither then manifests. Both disappear into their equilibrium to reappear as the other. Life and death gradually interchange to cancel each other for the purpose of repeating the cycle of life and death. Death is born in the same cradle with life, but life is strong while death is weak. From the very first breath of the newborn babe, death voids life by each outward breath, and life voids death by each inward breath. At maturity, death has become balanced with life, and death then becomes stronger, until both disappear to reappear with life as the stronger, and death with the weaker opposite. This expanding universe. It is said that the universe is expanding to a heat death, that all heat is gradually going out of the universe, leaving it utterly cold and empty. It is believed that radiation is a downhill flow of energy, which is not compensated for by an equal uphill flow. Radiation is known as radiant energy. Radiation is but the outbreathing of this universal body, which breathes in its entirety exactly as man and all things else in nature breathe. Radiation is the unfolding mother light. The inbreathing of nature is gravitation. Gravitation is the father light, which refolds that which unfolds. For every drop of water that radiant energy discharges from the earth, gravitation energy charges it with falling waters. One of these opposites is the downhill flow of expressed energy, and the other is its equal uphill flow. Every creating thing in this universe has a father and a mother. Not only animal and vegetable life, but every corpuscle of matter in the universe. Likewise, every creating thing is both father and mother. The mother borns the father, and the father borns the mother. The proton borns the electron, and the electron the proton. Each was the other, and each sequentially becomes the other through the pulsing breath of wave interchange.
But that's what it does. That's the only thing it can do, because that's how everything works.
Transferring from another dimension.
Yeah, you could say it's taking energy from another dimension, counter space.